put my flashlight over on the field just to kind of see. It was utter destruction. I came back in the house and I said to Ben, it's bad.
Hey folks, it's Nick with Bootstrap Farmer. I'm here with Bouldin Food Forest and my co-host Carrie. We're here for the main event, and that is to talk about that. The only thing I can say at this point is wind event until we really talk about what the meteorologist already told you. So the number one question we get on hoop houses is how do they do in the wind? And this podcast is going to be the be all and end all of what they can do. At least ours. So September 24th, this happened?
Yes.
September 24th, it was a Saturday, Sunday, kind of over the weekend?
I think it was a Friday.
Okay. So I opened up my personal Instagram and I saw the post that you had made that you had been hit with a very severe storm. We had been watching you guys for a long time. I've been meaning to reach out, so this was my opportunity to go, hey, what can we do? I sent an email, called, sent an email, and I think at the same time, I sent it to Ben because your name was in the system, and at the same time, you were basically DMing Bootstrap Farmer. We're on the phone a couple hours later. Let's start there.
It was a dark and stormy night. It was stormy, but most of the storms had gone around us, which happens all the time in where we are. We're kind of in a weird zone where storms will split. And
we call it the bubble.
Yeah, we're in some sort of bubble.
Bubble boy.
And we thought we were clear. And then about 20 minutes later, suddenly it started storming again. I looked at the radar on my phone and it was bad. It was really, really bad. The colors you don't want to see ever.
It was the dark purple.
Yeah, the dark purple.
And again, that sky is so big where you're at. I can't imagine this looming thing that's coming at you.
And almost immediately the wind started howling really, really hard and very loudly. I mean, we get a lot of wind out where we are. We'll get 30, 40 mile an hour winds and storms pretty regularly. But this was something else.
Yeah, our windows popped in.
Yeah, one of our bedroom windows blew in the house. There was a little bit of hail. The rain was completely sideways. The house was our main house was vibrating, which we'd never experienced before.
And that we heard that it was the train sound that you associate with tornadoes. That, whoo,
Yeah, that high pitched whine. Yeah, it was scary, but it was over in 5-10 minutes. It seemed like.
It's a long 5 or 10 minutes.
Yeah.
So it wasn't long enough for us to take cover, but we have a weather station out in the field, watching that, and the one I saw, it may not go any higher, but it was like 65 miles an hour.
And correct me if I'm wrong, this happened after dark? Or because I think you couldn't see the damage really until the next day, right?
It happened after dark, and the way that I discovered it was I had a guest staying with us, and I went out to get something for her and had a flashlight, walked past the field, and the tunnels that we have stood for the last couple of years. We're on version 18, I think, of building them. We build them ourselves. We bend our own hoops and made them all ourselves, but over the years, they've gotten very, very strong, very reliable.
And these are Caterpillar style.
These are Caterpillar style, 20-foot wide, 100-foot long. But we've reinforced them over the years. We've made all these changes over the years, and I felt very confident about them. And so walking out, to get something out of the cooler, I put my flashlight over on the field just to kind of see, and it was utter destruction. And I was in shock. I mean, I was genuinely in shock. I came back in the house and I said to Ben, it's bad. And I wasn't crying. I wasn't anything. That's how bad it was I just said, it's bad. It's really bad. And that was it. I mean, until the morning, we couldn't really see what was going on.
And in the morning, I mean, it was shocking how bad it was. Our large high tunnel, our 70 by 30 foot high tunnel, was caved in like a giant had stepped on it. A 50 foot, 100 foot giant just took their foot and just crushed it. We have 7 tunnels altogether. 5 of them are field tunnels, 2 are larger hoop houses. And all of them were damaged or destroyed except one, which came through unscathed, which we'll talk about. And the field tunnels, the cat-style tunnels, they were just strewn across each other. The plastic was ripped off. The metal hoops were bent. Same thing from above, like something had stepped on them and just
Right down
snapped
the middle.
them. And these are all, no plastic, is all metal stuff.
Yeah, block 6 tunnel was in block 4. So, the entire tunnel picked up and flipped on its back and landed in, two rows away. 2
And on the
fields away.
video version of this, we're going to show pictures, but it just doesn't do it justice.
It doesn't.
Because you see a frame that there's some damage, but not seeing it in 3D and not seeing the whole expanse of what you guys were having to deal. And I got there several days after the fact where you guys already cleaned up some stuff, and it was still horrendous.
Yeah.
Joel went down there, and I told him, I said, this is every farmer's worst possible nightmare outside of a death, because you were completely devastated from one end to the other.
It was all gone.
Yeah, there was hardware
Except for that
everywhere.
door. The pack house door.
Except the pack house door was still
Yeah,
standing.
just fine. Yeah, and you were numb and shocked. What are we going to do? That's your first question. What do we do?
What do we do?
And your immediate reaction is to start cleaning up, but there's so much to clean up that it's overwhelming.
Yeah.
And remarkably, none of the plants were damaged. Some of them were bent over and they had some wind stress, but I don't think there was one plant that was dead out of the whole 2-acre planted area, which was also kind of crazy. Nothing was uprooted. A bunch of tree branches were knocked down on various trees on the property, but we were lucky in that way. But the hardware for the tunnels was largely decimated.
What do you do? What happened next?
We cried.
Yeah.
I cried.
Yeah, I think first and foremost, you have to grieve for it because it's in a matter of 5-10 minutes, what you'd spent years building was just gone.
And those tunnels were my babies. The field tunnels were. They were something that I had designed, built, worked so hard to reinforce and, do research on what kind of hardware to use, everything. So to see them that way, because it was something I had come to just over the past few years to just rely. That they're there, they're the landscape. That's what you see when you walk out the door. And to have those just be not even gone, but just mangled, that was the worst part.
That's the thing.
Yeah.
So I lost a tunnel in a high house. I'll show those pictures. And what you don't know, yours was more of a downforce wind, which we'll talk about in a second. Mine was actually rolled, and the metal was twisted around the plastic, around the boards, around the wiggle wire, and it's we couldn't do anything with it. We had to just basically cut it up with a Sawzall, and that was it.
Yeah.
It's hard to move. It's hard to, where do you even start, kind of thing.
I think what we did was Hannah and I started working on it, and I said, we just have to eat the elephant. You just literally just one bite at a time, pick up this screw. That's what we did. And we had a lot of people who volunteered to come out and help, which was amazing. We had people from the Central Texas Farmers Market. They came out to help us. And basically we just got buckets and started all right, anything that's a bolt, put a bolt in that bucket and put screws in this one. And that's how we did it. It was literally just 1 inch at a time.
Yeah. What happens or what needs to happen after you grieve, however long that is, which you have to do for what happened. The second thing you have to do is ask for help. Many farmers are loath to do that. I know I am. That's part of my history. I consider myself, I can grit through this. I can power through it. I can take care of myself. But in something like this, you can't. You have to ask for help. You have to enlist your community, your neighbors, your family, your friends, whoever it is, to, if they have a specialized thing they can do, because you will recover so much faster when you ask for help, both physically on the ground and mentally, which is probably the harder part to in the immediate aftermath, to get over it and to move forward.
5 months behind it. I mean, and I can't believe how much stuff has actually got done from when I first saw it, you know. And I can't remember what we said during our first conversation, other than, I don't know how we can help, but we'll figure something out. And we did. That's all we did, is just figure it out. I wanted to come down and just assess with you, because you had questions about where to start. I'm like, I don't know, because I'm not there. So I can't remember how long it was before I was able to come down, a few days. I'm emotionally removed from this at that point, and where would I start if I was hired to do this? And I think that's kind of where we came. You know, what can we salvage? What can we not?
Yep.
What needs to be replaced? What needs to be scratched? How do we get you back up on your feet as economically as possible through our contacts and vendors and stuff like that? And they pitched in and helped whenever they heard what we were doing, which was great.
Yep.
That was actually the rainbow moment of this whole event. I can't even express to you how impactful that was for us, because we had no idea that you even knew who we were. You know, we order a lot of stuff from you, but we had no idea that you even knew us. So when I reached out, my goal was to say, like, out of 7 tunnels that we have, yours was the only one that was left standing.
And undamaged.
And completely undamaged. I mean, not even a tear in the plastic.
And it was a moment for us too, looking at it, it's like, look at this thing. I mean, the giant tunnel right next to it was
crushed,
almost completely destroyed. It's still standing, but yeah, we can't put plastic on it again. Right. And yours is right next to it, and it was just a moment for us, like, how the hell did this happen? Why is this
right next to it? We're talking like 4 feet.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, literally.
Yeah. And the giant one has 2.5-inch diameter ribs on it.
Yeah, I mean, it's massive.
It is a big tunnel, and with pretty good steel, and yet it was, yeah.
So for me, it was, I reached out to you guys to say, like, this is amazing. Like, thank you so much for building something that's so high quality that we still have.
We're so glad it's there and it's
right.
fine.
And I reached out just to say, like, thank you for that. And then within 30 minutes, you had, you know, called me. And as soon as we got off the phone, I went to Ben and I said, I just talked to Nick at Bootstrap Farmer. They know who we are. It was like, they're going to come out and help us. And it was that changed everything.
It was a moment for us.
It was a moment, because up to that point, I said to Ben, I'm like, I think we're done. I mean, how are we going to do this? You know, this is it. And to have the support that we did from you, and the instant response, and the fact that you came out, you were able to help us, you were able to get us, you know, the equipment we needed to get started, that was the continuation of our farm, like, literally. So,
and I think that we played such a small part, because you guys were the ones on the ground every single day having to live through it. We did all we could, but to me, it's never enough, right? And look, proximity helped. We'd followed you for so long because you have been such loyal customers for such a long time, and you're always on my hit list to go down and visit, do a farm tour, and anything. So, and I told you, I follow very few farmers personally. I saw this on my personal page. And that's where it happened from. So that's how much we were kind of checking you guys out for such a long time. I mean, had you guys been in Montana, I couldn't have come over. You know, I couldn't have, I don't know, is it 3 or 4 times I've been? Joel's came, another Bootstrap Farmer employee came and helped. That 2 days we were able to come down. Proximity had a lot to do with our ability to help.
Yeah.
Being centrally located had a lot to do. So it's not like I can't pick up every time somebody has an event. And also, I want to take care of the people. You guys have taken care of us for so long. We wanted to reciprocate as a company. There was a lot of people that reach out and be like, hey, can we help? You know, can you help us? You don't even have an order with us. And I don't want to make it about that. But this goes back to the community that we're building.
Right. Buying local, supporting local.
you guys are our neighbors. You're down the road.
Yep.
Right.
It's a long road, but
It's
you're
a
still
big,
down the
long road.
But all I can tell you is this, I talked to the owner of the company. I said, I don't know what we're going to do here. I need a little leeway to make sure these people are taken care of. And immediate response, yes. And, and we worked through it. It wasn't, you're here not because of us. You're here because that, you had an amazing support group locally that helped you, but it was you too that decided that this wasn't going to let you get it down, So just don't forget that, because you're the ones that made it happen. We're a very tiny part of it.
Well, we appreciate that so much, and what all of you have done for us, and part of a community that both online, we put together a GoFundMe. We hit our goal for that, which blew our minds. We had neighbors come over and volunteer to help do things. Some fellow farmers came out, had gone through something similar and offered advice. And
Our employees.
Yeah, our employees came in on their day off just to volunteer to help clean up. I mean, it was remarkable for us, and heart-touching about the power of community in a crisis.
And how the most important thing for us doing a fundraiser was our community. We didn't want to let any of our employees go because their families rely on us and they rely on us. And so that was our first thought was, we're going to have to let everybody go if we don't have anything to farm. But we couldn't do that. I mean, our employee, Ann and Hannah and Gerardo, they're our family. So it was important to us to be able to get back up and running so that we would still have a community,
I'm a very glass half, what is it? What is it, the one?
Your glass half empty.
There you go. I don't know, whatever. I'm a very what is it?
Glass
half empty.
Yes. I'm a very glass half empty kind of person. I'm always thinking about what could happen. You guys are so positive and like you're just in it. It's not like this has never crossed your mind, but one of our great friends, Amanda Van Hooser, she says one of the things that always kills a farm is a major life event. That could be a death in the family, an injury. We talked about that in the last episode. Your house could burn down. Like all of these things happen. Like this stuff happens. And I think having some type of contingency plan is something you need to consider. I mean, now you guys know what to do, right? And I can foresee somebody else going through this and you reaching out to them and be like, hey, this is our experience. This is how you're going to get through it too. Unfortunately, it's probably is going to devastate some farms that, I'm not saying they're not as tough as you guys are, but they may not have the same support kind of thing. So,
well, I think especially with climate change and how climate is causing wild fluctuations in weather, especially with storms, it's clear that it's going to happen to every farm. You are going to have a major wind event. And the wind event that we had was...
Or a flood.
Or hail.
Or fire in different parts of the country. In our case, it was an 80 or 90 mile an hour downdraft for which we were the bullseye of the target.
Now, you had a meteorologist come out, and I'd like for you to kind of relive that conversation.
Yeah, it was online. The meteorologist who was in Temple saw that, what had happened, and it was a downdraft of some sort.
A downdraft is essentially a tornado without rotation. So a downdraft is just coming straight down.
Yeah, when you see
crushing.
Storm clouds where they are building up into a giant anvil, that's a whole bunch of energy that's building up in the atmosphere 40, 50,000 feet high. Usually it comes down in the form of rain. In this case, it came down in the form of wind, because when it builds up like that, what goes up has to come down. And in this case, it came down right on top of us. And with those winds that were just incredibly enormous. So all that energy was released basically on top of our farm. Yeah, it was the giant that stepped on our tunnels and crushed them.
Yeah, and that's exactly what it looked like. And we'll show pictures. If your hoop house is here, they were just either leant over, bent, or splayed down, or in the case of the big hoop house, just one side just crushed down. It was wild to see.
Insane, yeah.
Yeah, and one farmer that we know of said, what happened to you is my worst nightmare. And the response is, well, be ready, because it will happen. And I think for me that, in a previous conversation we had about spending the money on the best stuff you can get, this is essential. If you are going to do protected culture farming like we do, we learn the hard way through multiple iterations of our tunnels, starting with PVC,
half-inch PVC,
half-inch PVC, then inch and a quarter PVC, and it cracking and breaking, and then going to top rail from big box stores, which is what we use, and it worked for a little while. But in a big wind event, that steel is not as tough and strong as stuff that you guys produce, and your 60 by 20 hoop house was living proof of that it came through that storm of nearly 100-mile-an-hour winds and it was unfazed.
I get the idea, like some people think that we're just whittling these on our back porch and sending them that. Like, we haven't thought about how can we make these the best they can be while keeping a certain price point, or that's why we do it the way we do it with so many options. Because if you're not in a high exposure area, maybe you don't have to have all the bracing, but if it is a concern, we have that option as well. And there's a lot of questions that get thrown our way about what's the wind speed test, what's this, what's that. And what is always failed to be understood is Texas, and your location is different than Texas than my location. There's classifications for Florida that's much higher than what you would get in the Rockies. But then there's more snow load. Well, is it wet snow or is it dry snow? And so when they say, well, can we get a stamped engineer drawing? You could, but it costs a lot of money for that address. And so when we first developed this, we planned for, was it Yonkers, New York? What's that place? There's some place in New York. Where's the Buffalo Bills?
Buffalo.
Oh, dang it, that is funny. That is the extent of my football knowledge. So we found a park in, that's hysterical. We found a park in central Buffalo, and that was the address that we used. Cost us thousands of dollars. It's one of the highest snowfall areas, right? But what does that not account for? The soil structure, the wind, all these other factors that come in. And so when somebody from the Denver City Council that won't allow anything to happen, you would have to get that done again, which means you have to find somebody in that state to certify and look at that soil for that address, because it's more to do with soil structure than anything else. And then there's all these different exposure situations, like, is this near trees? Is it near a building? Is it near a valley? Is it this, that? And so if we were to pass that cost along to the farmers, these houses would cost like double, because we'd have to do it custom for everybody, when most people, A, don't need it, and B, the structural engineer that we used, there's so much interpretation because there's different classes of buildings. So a school, a hospital, a police station is built to much higher specs than a residential, which is built to much higher specs than a shed.
Right.
And so it's a non-inhabitable structure that you're not supposed to be in during a wind event, that is not sheltering any living form. There's a lot of leeway that you could do, but you have a bureaucrat with a clipboard and a box that it's not a black and white check here.
Well, and not only that, but I mean, our land, we're on Blackland Prairie, which is a very narrow swath of land in Texas. If you go, 30 miles to the east or to the west, it's caliche, it's rock. Mm-hmm. So, you can't even say Texas. You can't even say this zone or this area. We had a hoop house go
up in Austin, and it was a nightmare for them to get the ground post in, because it's 2 inches down, it's rock.
Yes.
And then what do you do? So it's like, we have to build a structure that a contractor can put up, a 65-year-old woman by herself can put up, that we talked about yesterday, little sweetheart, or general farmers, or you. And we have to do this for everybody. And so we have to build it in which way that there's a little bit of wiggle room on the squareness and this, that, and the other. But we also have to stand behind this as a company and go, how can we make this the best? And a lot of part of that was using the U.S. source steel that we could check the lead like, is this thing full of lead like you typically
Right.
get from overseas because it's cheaper, and that means it's softer? It's a big difference.
That was what we experienced.
And so 1.35 16 gauge US versus 1.35 16 gauge shipped in from overseas, it's a vastly different product.
Yeah. And also I think that 20-foot hoop, the stuff that you buy at box stores is 10 feet.
Right.
And you have to bend it and then you have to connect it in the middle. And
That's a fault point.
that's a fault point. And that's where, all of our tunnels that got crushed from above, they got crushed at the purlin at the center. And so with yours, since it's a solid hoop, you don't get that stress point in the middle.
And then in the shear tests and everything that the structural engineers plan this for, the end walls take most of the brunt. Our tunnels are typically higher than most tunnels on the market, so we do have a little bit more pressure. The weak and the fail point on the computer models is always at the ground level. So your cat tunnel hoops in rebar pins, they went over. But that's always the play in between the hoop and the ground post has more to do with structural integrity than anything else. If there's too much play, it's a failure point.
Yep.
If it's stronger, if it's thicker, if it's deeper, that's what is really saves, especially in snow and wind load.
Yeah, dissipating that energy
Right.
is absolutely fundamental to the lifespan or success of a tunnel in a wind event. And I mean, that's one of our key takeaways from this event is all of our cat tunnels, all of our hoop houses now are all ground post based. No more rebar on any of them, which they all were. It's a fast, economical move, but for the short term, not for the long term.
It's a calculated trade-off. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but it's what you guys had to do to get started.
Absolutely.
But now that you're more established, you can make those kind of commitments to the farm infrastructure.
And for a new or relatively new farm, spend a little extra time, save a little extra money. That's what I wish we would have done, and get the better quality because it will last longer, especially in a wind event.
And I don't want to get it twisted, man. I mean, let's say you did all that. There's nothing to say that you still, given the force of what you guys went through, we're still not going to have damage. Could it have been mitigated and been much less? Who knows? Yeah. You know what I mean? But I'm glad ours survived, and I'm glad
We are too.
I'm glad any repairs that we did was to other people's structures, including the 30-foot. But I still wasn't happy about it for you. You know what I mean? But it did reassure us that we have built this thing to the best of our ability with our vendor partners, with the structural, and we still work with structural engineers. God, they're expensive, and we used 3 different firms over the course of the 2 years in development. And we knew that we couldn't give you a piece of paper. We actually had 3 different locations that we had these things trialed out at. And I'm like, here it is. It's 105 miles an hour is what this thing's rated for in North Carolina. I don't know if that's going to help you where you're at. Is your city council going to take it, or is your bureaucrat going to take it? Who knows? Most of the time it was grandfathered in. And then, look, sometimes we get an NRCS agent that gets a wild hair, and they're like, we got to have structural engineering plans. No, you don't. It's not in there. You know what I mean? But they're trying to cover theirself too.
And especially today with insurance rates rising so quickly across Texas, especially Florida, other states, it's not necessarily economically viable for that one-time event.
Well, look, and we can't even get other people in our industry to decide what a market farmer is. I mean, we're expecting an insurance agent to understand what a hoop house is. They're going to say, oh, it's a greenhouse, or it's a this, or it's a that. And it's not going to be right. And look, the industry doesn't help itself we have caterpillar tunnels and low tunnels and high houses and hoop houses and greenhouses, all this stuff. It's confusing to people in the industry, until you start talking to these structural engineers and talking to your metal suppliers and your fabricators. We have learned so much by partnering up with the right people. And that's the joke I make about we're not whittling this on the back porch. We hire the very best people we can find, and we vet them, and they have to be within a certain geographical radius of us so we can go and check. Like I have to go physically check on these folks and work with them to make things better over time.
Yeah, and I think one thing that's important too is when we were in the process of finding a tunnel for the NRCS grant, there are a lot of companies out there that make them. And we were always looking at wind rating. And that was one category that, some say these are not rated for high winds. You'll have to buy supplementary kit in order to make this. And I think their definition of high wind was like 40 miles an hour or 50 miles an hour.
And they really still can't give it to you. No,
right.
We shop other companies, right? I mean, that's part of what we do. And nobody will give you a structural engineered plan. We tried, but God, the expense we spent way too much. But we learned a lot in the process, so I guess it all worked out. But we could never give you a piece of paper that says.
Yeah.
And even if we did, even if we said this thing can hold 105 pounds worth of snow per square foot,
right?
How the hell are you going to calculate that?
Right.
Right. You just do right by your people that support you. That's what we try to do. Let's talk about the rebuilding. And so I'll make some observations that I came across, and I'm going to equate this with another question that we get at customer service is, hey, can I move this hoop house? Or I'm going to buy a used hoop house and move it. What do we do? If I had to answer that question or to go to somebody and it's like, hey, you're fixing to build this. And one of the things that slowed us down a little bit was like, I would just scrap all of the connectors and all of the hardware and start fresh. Maybe you can save the pipes and the hoops and everything, but trying to rebend a cross connector was horrendous. Trying to use 16 different bolt heads and sizes was a mess. That's one thing I would have changed going into this is like, here's a bunch of hardware.
Yeah, we really, again, talking about waste and not wanting to get rid of things and just throw things away, we really did want to try to save as much as we could. And you're right. I mean, the conclusion was, is it the cost and the time savings really worth it?
Well, and look, we were down there, and look what happened. We had to go to the store a few times,
right?
Which is an hour trip one way,
right?
So it's like we could have got so much more done had we had known. We could have showed up with several cases of cross connectors and all of the bolts in the world, and overbought or overbrought, and then used what we needed, and then figured it out at the end.
Yeah, the takeaway,
in order to save time.
Yeah, the takeaway is if you have a devastating event on a tunnel, buy all new hardware of the connectors, the screws, all that stuff. Don't try to salvage it. It's probably wind damage at some point, and the weakest point on any new structure is the fault point for its future demise.
Well, and we talked about it earlier, all the bad stuff happens at the most inopportune time. We were facing down with the season's first frost, and you guys had all those crops. Thankfully, you didn't lose the crops. But we had the first frost coming real quick, and we barely made it. And by we, those of you, I mean, I was nothing, but...
Yeah, it was harrowing knowing that was coming, and we had to get things protected as quickly as possible. And we did actually manage to save a lot of the stuff that came from that event, and we'll use it for other purposes, make a small little storage tunnel or whatever with what we had left over.
Yeah, it'll be shade tunnels this summer with just with shade cloth on it. No plastic.
Do you guys have any calculations of what the total cost of the damage was, not including labor?
I think $50,000 was our guesstimate.
Yeah.
So
it's a lot of heads of lettuce.
It's a lot of heads of lettuce.
It is.
Yeah.
A lot of beets.
As a consumer, what do you think about all this?
I think the fact that you talked about you had so many of your customers who came and helped and volunteered, like that just shows how much how much we really care about the farms. And you said it last night when you were talking about one of the biggest things somebody's ever said when she brought your kid and like, this is our farmer. So I was supposed to get to go with Nick up there to y'all, and I don't remember what came up, but he needed to go and I couldn't go, and I was sad. But it's really cool to just hear how many people stepped up and helped y'all, because like you said, you can't do it on your own, and so that's why this community building is so important. And when he showed me the pictures, I remember the day when it happened, because Nick was showing me those pictures that morning, and how devastating it was, and you really can't understand how big it was until he came back and was just telling me more. And
That's wild.
Yeah.
That first Sunday at the farmers market after the event, we'd posted it on Instagram. The number of people who kicked in money to us, whether through the transaction on our terminal or just, handing us an extra $20 or $50 bill that was just
really heartwarming.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we did a GoFundMe, and it was so many people that our friends and our community, but also people that we've never met, we don't know, and they just follow us, and they care about what we do and wanted to see us keep going.
And to know how much, like you said, somebody gave you extra $20, like that's nothing. Sometimes for some people that's a lot, but it's such a small thing that can have such a huge impact for y'all.
All adds up.
And it also demonstrated and reinforced for us, as it needs to be done every few months, I think, is the importance from a farmer of telling your story on a regular basis, of building that relationship online, if it's through Instagram or Facebook, of what you're doing and why you're doing it and who's involved. Because people do want to follow farms. Not everybody in the world, but they are invested emotionally and financially sometimes.
You didn't need everybody to follow you to get rebuilt. No. The GoFundMe proved that there's enough people out there that cared enough to vote with their dollar for that. Just the GoFundMe alone to help get you back on the feet. And then all the clients that you have week to week, continuing that as they go, both previously and afterwards and through the event. It's people do, as with much doom and gloom as people talk about, big ag and this, that, and the other, there's still enough people to support what we're all doing, and there's still not enough farms, Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I think that we're finding now that we are behind on certain crops, and I'm like, why don't we have this? And it's like, well, because we were supposed to be taking care of that in November.
Right.
We were supposed to plant this at that time. We were supposed to plant this, but we couldn't because we were trying to rebuild. So it's reverberating through the rest of our season and into spring and summer.
It's going to take, I think it's going to take a year or two to finally get back to where you were on the track. Because you had to spend so many hours down, not doing what you needed to be doing.
Right.
It's going to have a whiplash effect.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that's a good learning opportunity or education opportunity, whatever, because until you just said that, I didn't think about the fact that, this has pushed y'all back. Like, obviously it's pushed you back, but this has pushed you back for a whole season.
Right.
And so when you were supposed to be planting, you couldn't. So that reinforces the idea of farmers are planning what they're bringing to market months in advance.
And hopefully we're bringing our frost blanket on time and shade on time.
Yes.
Hey.
Order it before it's coming.
Apparently a freeze coming this weekend too.
Yeah. Look, it was the emotional stress. It was the rebuilding cost, and now it's trickling down to there's a loss of income still to this day of not getting all the crops in the ground that you had planned on. Mm-hmm. And I think that not only did you have the cost of rebuilding, but you also added on the expense of beefing up as you went along. So it was more expensive than what it would have been to rebuild, because now you're building better for just a little bit more peace of mind, which I think is highly valuable at this point.
Very valuable.
Yep.
Yeah, it's easily put us back 6 months, but more realistically, because we are just now getting ready to rebuild the final field tunnel, which has been down since September. And that's lost revenue right there for whatever it's been now, 6 months, that could have been producing easily the cost of replacing that tunnel itself in terms of revenue. So once that is back up, hopefully in the next few weeks and kicking in some revenue, then we're almost back on track.
I almost don't want to quit talking because I keep thinking of stuff that's adding up. Because even the crops that you didn't lose, they were probably smaller. They probably weren't as vibrant. Like even something you're able to sell, you probably could have got more for because it would have been so much better undercover.
Absolutely.
Sorry to keep bringing up old stuff.
Well, and that's one reason why you farm in protected culture is because, we have a lettuce crop right now in one of our tunnels, and it is
so beautiful.
Beautiful, and it's fantastic, and it's full, and it's vibrant. And the stuff that's out in the open field looks nothing like that because it's been going through winter. And the heat, the temperature changes are so dramatic outside, but in one of the tunnels, it will be a bumper crop in February.
Yeah.
And I can't help but think also, we get so, just as society and the people, everything, we're so one track that, oh, okay, you're done fundraising, you've rebuilt, okay, move on to the next thing. But even now, if your customers can still give that extra $20 now because you're losing income now because of something that happened months ago. So your event is not over. It may seem like, oh, they rebuilt, it's over, move on to the next thing.
But farming is
not
something. Yeah, I mean, farming, there's crops that take 6 months to grow.
Yeah.
And those should have been planted in November, and they're not. And so now we don't have those things, that we should have now. And I think it's easy to lose sight of that with farming, that it's not, hey, can you grow us some carrots? Sure. In 6 months, they'll be ready for you. you know? So it's
well, and even those little micro losses happen. They're going to happen anyway. You're going to get an early frost. You're going to get too much water. You're not going to get enough water. You're going to have an irrigation break. You're going to have a row get eaten up by a vole or something like that. It's like you guys had it all at once, all at the same time. But every single farmer is going to have a little bit of that loss, which means, are we planting more? Are we having a higher value crop? Are we doing something to up the value at sale at the time? Do we need more clients? All of that, all of it adds up.
Yeah.
Yeah, building in hedges against unforeseen circumstances, which are probably not necessarily unforeseen, but one time or infrequent circumstances, probably the best way to put it, is probably a necessary strategy, and one of the reasons why we're expanding our planted area a little bit too, so that if we do have, knock on wood, another event that is devastating to the farm, we've got some other ways to recoup revenue, or at least have revenue coming in.
And microgreens was a big factor for us as well.
Oh, God. We haven't even talked about microgreens. Yeah, that is one of our key crops. And in our prop house where we grow our microgreens, came through fine. And microgreens has helped us, over the winter months, is a key revenue driver for us. And through that event was also a key revenue driver for us as well, even before the first frost.
I can't. I'm just kind of speechless about it. I mean, you guys would come through with flying colors. I was there a couple of weeks ago. I mean, you can hardly tell it's happened. If I didn't know it happened, I wouldn't have been able to. I just thought, well, they're building a tunnel at this point, So I mean, you guys have bounced back. I know it's been a long 5 months, but then again, it's only been 5 months, and here we are, and you guys are going like gangbusters, fixing to hit the spring. So I mean, hats off to you. Really, it's pretty amazing.
Thank you.
Thanks. Well, as Vanessa and I say to ourselves, we couldn't have done it with you and the Bootstrap crew. It's such a key part of our bouncing back from this and being able to move forward. So thank you.
I'm selfishly glad it happened so we could finally meet. So hope it doesn't happen again, but we'll be there for you. You guys have made a long trip up here, so everybody, please leave a comment. Tell them thank you for sharing their stories. It's been, I think there's a lot of lessons to take, and you can bounce back, and it's hopefully not the end of the world for anybody else this happens to. So it's a big shining light. Can't thank enough. So thank you. Back of the camera there, and have a safe trip.
Thanks.
We will catch up. I'm gonna come this summer. We were gonna do a proper farm tour when everything's up and running. Right when you're busy, I'll come put the camera in your face again.
Yep, sounds great.
Yeah, we'll have a lot of tomatoes this season, so come and look at those.
Yep.
We'll do. Thank you.
Thank you.